Well, welcome everyone. It's 9 o'clock, so we will get started. I think most of us are pretty familiar with Zoom at this point. So if you're not, in the lower left corner of your Zoom screen, feel free to test your audio because we do want to have this be an interactive session. And if you'd like to ask a question, we will monitor the chat. And if you would prefer to be unmuted, we can unmute you and we can have a dialogue. So in the lower left corner, you can test your audio features. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat feature. And if you have a webcam, we'd love to see your face, so feel free to turn that on. And welcome. So this is another special webinar series being brought to all of our higher education leadership friends at the SUNY system and beyond. We're part of the SAIL Institute, and I'm proud to be joined by our Senior Leadership Fellow, Garry Sanders. So a little bit about Garry before I turn it over to him this morning. He's been with the SAIL Institute since its inception about 4 years ago, and he serves as an executive coach for individual leaders in all industries with a focus on higher education. He's principal of Assist Leadership, a leadership coaching and consulting firm, and he sees his mission as coach as being a ladder, a steady presence to help clients as they discover their strengths and courage, and to serve them as they transform themselves and their organizations. He was trained as an executive coach at Georgetown University, and he is professionally certified through the International Coaching Federation, ICF. Garry's a leadership coach for the Academy of Innovative Higher Education Leadership, a collaboration between Georgetown University and Arizona State University, and he coaches higher ed leaders across the country. He also serves as an adjunct graduate school instructor at the Johns Hopkins University. Garry has served as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Research Foundation for SUNY, leading cross-functional teams and large project and program implementations for the SUNY Research Enterprise. He began his career as a United States Presidential Management Fellow, and he served as faculty member for the National Council of University Research Administrators. He also just delivered a very similar presentation to NCURA, and it's a national audience, and so there were over 500 participants there. Just in this past week, he's had to update this talk. So this is leadership on the fly and constantly evolving here. So we appreciate all of the time you've put into preparing this for us, Garry, and we look forward to learning together. Thank you.
Carolyn, thank you. Thank you for your leadership and all you're doing for SAIL and for SUNY and for being host today. And I want to thank everybody for making time in your schedules for one more Zoom call. I know all of you are probably Zoomed out, and here you are this morning. So I'm truly happy that you're here. And as Carolyn said, we'll make this interactive, and I look forward to your thoughts and inspirations as you have either been in leadership roles now or you're experiencing leadership. Very interested in hearing what you've been learning. So what I'd like to do is, let's see. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So you're probably wondering, why is there a picture of a desert out here with cactuses? And so, as you probably can see, we have socially distant cactuses in the middle of the Arizona desert, enjoying the nourishment of the sun and the earth below. And oftentimes when coaches or folks in organizational work start presentations, they offer a moment of mindfulness, and they do that really for a couple of reasons. And if you're willing to do this with me before we get going in earnest, I hope you find it worthwhile. The big challenge for leaders, and this is the lesson that we've been learning certainly now, but also throughout time, is being able to be mindful of the present, being able to catch themselves between the moments when they receive information, when they find out some news, and then they have to react to that news and information by making a choice, by making a decision of some kind. And that space between the stimuli of the news and information and their reaction, which could be an emotional reaction, there could be a choice of some kind, but that precious space in between is the period of mindfulness where they really have options over how to respond, how to behave. And so let's just do a very quick mindfulness exercise here. And I'd invite you, if you're in a place and want to do this, to close your eyes and just ask you to take 5 deep breaths with your feet squarely on the ground so you can feel beneath the room you're in, the earth coming up, and just take 5 deep breaths at your own pace, and then we'll come back. Okay, I invite you in the chat function to share with us how that felt for you, to actually take basically a minute. I don't think that took us more than a minute to do. How that felt to you, if you felt anything that would help you in your day-to-day work to at least present yourself with a pause opportunity as we move on. So leadership certainly is something that happens within us and how it's expressed to the outer world. And my friends, we have experienced in these last 3 or 4 months a overdose of context. And you have a slide here with just an example of headlines that focused at the time only on COVID and the virus reactions and vaccines, and there's a little bit here about the economic impact. So this context has really been unusually acute, deep, troubling, depressing. All of those things have been real emotion and life and death issues. And there was a study done by the Gallup Group a few weeks back that this is not the highest point of Americans' sense of being in the world. It's a tough time, and actually, that empty bottle of hand sanitizer comes from my garage, where I went out and saw it just basically had a little bit of a centimeter in there, and I turned this thing upside down to try to extract every last item of hand sanitizer from it. So I am also someone feeling challenge in well-being. So on top of everything of the last week, the last few months, we have new context to add, sad context, the latest challenges to this country in terms of injustice and murder and racial inequity, all of this. And well, the purpose of our talk this morning is to not really to go into each of these contextual things in depth. It's just to recognize that they're there, they need to be dealt with, and basically that leaders don't really have a choice in this. These are contextual items and basically in the practice of leadership, and how leaders respond, how they act, how they show up matters to their teams, their employees, to their customers and stakeholders. In our context with SUNY, for students, for everyone that matters in the SUNY infrastructure and community. So let me just share a couple of observations as a coach that I've had. So this goes through May, and I'll share a few of these with you. One of them is that when the virus first hit, there was this sense of disorientation, meaning, what is this? Feeling adrift, feeling without anchor. And bit by bit, and we even see this now in some places, a bit more of a reorientation. So, okay, what is my life like now? What does that look like? What is my future going to look like? And how can I make the most of it? So sort of seeing, going from a disorientation to, okay, I have now a compass out, and I have some sense of where I may be going. All that happened at lightning speed of just over a few months. And of course, not everybody is the same, and there are many leaders that I'm working with that are still in a disorientation phase of things, and their challenge is to get out of that as quickly as they can. The second dimension has to do with the transition between uncertainty and risk management. So the sense of uncertainty is one, as you know, feeling paralyzed in some sense, no information or unsure of what information actually exists. And there's still certainly a lot of that element there. But now you see leaders and organizations moving into a risk management phase, which is they're choosing to act based on what they know, understanding what they don't know, and trying to come up with their own assessment of risk, basically. So these are conversations about the reopening of campuses, the reopening of offices. Things like that are sort of a transition from this sense of paralysis around lack of information to, okay, based on what we know, what do we think we can do, and how can we do this as safely as we can? Nothing is 100% foolproof, and I think folks are beginning to get a sense of that. Third is about reaffirming and anchoring to values, and so many folks have been using this current period as a way to say to themselves, what really matters to me in my life and those that I care about. So you hear a lot often now about integrity, community, family, courage, values words that seem to connect and be persistent with the folks I've been working with, at least. And many people last year, possibilities and innovations, they're thinking about learning. How can they make themselves as adaptable and flexible so they're open to innovate? And so think of what all we've done in SUNY about online learning and how fast that had to happen for our campuses, how fast faculty, IT staffs, everyone in academic affairs, everybody in research administration, my old field, had to change their ways of doing business for these periods of time, and they're still in that mode. Our HR offices that are working through policies and procedures around flex time and working from home and all of that stuff. It's basically the question of what should organizations look like. And so SUNY is going through its exercises about the reopening of campuses. All the communities within within the university environment and around the university environment are also talking about how do we need to be rebuilt? What are we about? And as I said before, what is acceptable risk at this point for coming back and showing up, and what does that look like, and what are the ups and downs of these things? So these are things that leaders are working with, let alone the financial implications, and again, a restatement of values. And so you can enjoy with me this quote from just a couple of years ago, and I'll read it just to, I'm not sure who can actually see what. So this is from actually a wonderful book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And so here was state-of-the-art advice 3 years ago, just 3 years ago, merely replacing 4-person tables with 10-person tables has boosted productivity by 10%. The lesson of all of these studies is the same. Create spaces that maximize collisions. Well, I think you see me smiling. I'll go, basically my response as an employee to this is, you go first. The sense of comfort of having a 10-person table right now, of course, it's a whole other world. And actually 3 years is not all that long in terms of leadership theory and insights. And here we go to now, within basically days ago from McKinsey, 80% of people report they enjoy working from home, and probably a whole lot of those folks would love to continue to do that in some way. Maybe it's not 80% wanting to stay home all the time, but there's a vast majority of folks now that have changed their view of what it's like to work with an office and a team, and that brings up a whole host of issues. And if you want to bring up things in your mind in this context, that's great. And here's some of these questions. So one of my favorite here is about, so this idea now of working from home and not having a physical space, perhaps for some offices, is the second item there. How planned and unplanned moments of collaboration become impaired. I can think in my work days when I was going into an office every day, I would run into folks in the elevator, in the hallway. We might have a 3-minute conversation about something. I would learn something, the other person will learn something. That has become that much more challenging to happen, and I'm finding that from my clients, especially those that are responsible for onboarding new team members and things like that. So there will be new ways, hopefully will be innovated to come up with ways of mentoring, developing others, and hopefully the need to be separate and socially distant gets modified in time. And your guess on that is as good as mine. So as an exercise in leadership, how can we describe what we're living through? So there's a term called VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this comes from work of Warren Bennis and Bert Nanis. And so all the examples that we've had in this country in the last 4 months truly speak to that. Volatility about meaning how soon will something change? How will something arise in our lives and society, when they happen, how they happen? There's so much uncertainty within that. And also complexity. Most of the problems that we're experiencing in the last 4 months, including the events of the last few weeks with George Floyd's murder and other things. These things are complex issues to sort through and to realize paths forward. And you see society struggling with this and how to respond and how to do the right thing. I think the sense of ambiguity that's there is a sense of how do we know the information that we know, what data is clear to us. And I think this has been especially a challenge with the virus and understanding its impact and how it works and how it doesn't work. So ambiguity is the last piece. And so the point here is that it's not just these past 4 months that have given us this sense of VUCA. It's always been a VUCA world. It's may have been less intense than these past 4 months have been, but it certainly has always been elements of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So what's a leader to do? What is a leader to do? There's work from a neuropsychologist, David Rock, and he has a book. It's one of my personal favorites. It's called Your Brain at Work. And Rock talks about this concept of SCARF, SCARF. And you see the acronym for SCARF spelled out in the silhouette of this head. And it's about making meaning at work. And so as leaders think about their words, their actions, how to respond in a crisis, these issues of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness are what we hope to feel when we show up at work and how we interact with others. So I'll quickly go through this. So status, thinking of it as an employee, as a team member. When we show up to work, when we log on to Zoom and meet with our teams, meet with our supervisors and leaders, and as we're communicating with everyone else, what's going on in our brains, somewhere in our brain stems, mediated some way by cortisol flowing in our heads as we respond to stress in some way. What we want to know is, where do I stand? Do I matter? Where is my role here? And so that's the S here for SCARF. Certainty. In this environment, it's one of the toughest things, but what can I depend on? What's going to happen? I want to feel like I have some sense of what's going on, and I need to know information as much as I can, so I can truly be aware and help myself. Autonomy, very, very important. What part of this do I have some say and control? So what folks understand, I think overall, the need for policies, procedures, all of that stuff. How much of that can I influence? How much of that can be adapted from my circumstances? Are these rules and procedures? Do I have any discretion here? And what might that be? How will we know if it's working? And this is also, as I'm working with leaders, this is coming up as more and more of their staffs and teams are working from home. So I have one client now who is really all about trying to monitor the work of their team at home, and really working through some tough issues here around control and trust with their team. And we can talk more about that if you'd like also. Relatedness. Here's the fundamental one that everybody's wondering about all day long as they come to work, as they work with their teams and supervisors. Do you care about me? And how do I know that? Do you care about me? Fundamental thing going on in our brains constantly. And last, as life goes on, as procedures go on and everything, will you treat me fairly? Will I be treated fairly? Will I understand what the rules of the road are? I realize everything can't be totally consistent 24/7. There are different circumstances, but I need to know that I'm being treated fairly as I define that, right? There's the challenge, as I define that. So what is a leader to do? Well, So I came up with this slide basically through listening to my clients in the last few months about how they are trying to work through these current challenges. And again, I'd say this would apply to any crisis at any time. Sadly, the ones that we haven't even anticipated yet that will happen at some point in our lives and experiences. And the first one, manage yourself before managing others. So for the leaders out there, take care of yourself, take care of your own emotional intelligence. Do some mindfulness, do some self-awareness exercises so you can manage yourself before trying to manage others. It's basically, if we were flying on an airplane, this is the one about put your mask on yourself first before putting masks on other people. Embody care and compassion, probably self-explanatory, but compassion, people I think are struggling, especially in these past few weeks, about what does that actually mean? What does it mean for me to be compassionate? What does it mean to expect that of others? And I'm going to humbly try to get at that in a couple of slides. Probably won't get that right exactly, but I'm not really worried about that because I think having the conversation is the most important thing at the moment. And speaking of the moment, to be present with the team. It's so hard with Zoom. It's so hard with distance work like this, but still be present. Ask people how they're doing. Talk to them. Make the time for the one-on-one conversation by phone or by video, however it is, so that you can be present as a leader. Many people have trouble with this, especially many of my female clients seem to have challenges with this around feeling or being vulnerable, and I get that from the stories that they tell. And yet there is a need to be open to learn. There needs to be ways that a team can see that a leader doesn't have all the answers all the time, that they feel vulnerable because frankly, most of us do at some level or another. And that's going to vary by the person and their circumstances, but being vulnerable has been seen as one of the major attributes that folks see in their leaders to help build trust. If someone doesn't appear at all vulnerable or open to emotional impact, it hurts trust. So back to autonomy, let others manage their work lives. So these folks that want to have video cameras on their employees all the time, that want to monitor keystrokes, that's a tough day for the perfectionist out here. This is a real tough time for someone that wants everyone to follow their rules exactly how they want them done. And everybody should be productive for the full 8 or 9 hours or however many hours a day that you're supposed to work. This is the time instead for flexibility, giving broad mandates about work expectations, and let folks manage their own work lives. Communicate with dignity and clarity. Okay, so this next one about assume the best of intentions of others. So I used to say this in my old job, that I never thought that our employees woke up in the morning, looked themselves in the mirror and said, how can I screw things up for us? I don't think that ever happened. So it does help to have, to at least to gauge yourself that you have the best of intentions of others, because it's a hard day otherwise to always be trying to second guess folks, especially when we're all working at a distance. So best of intentions is actually a key part of dignity also. Asking questions from curiosity. I'm going to come back to the phrase compassionate curiosity, which I'm sure you've heard a lot of that as well lately, especially with the events of the last couple of weeks. Listen well, this is a time to be doing that for frankly any time, but this especially. So as leaders, you're going to be asked to make promises and commitments, right? You know, folks want you to decide things, to move forward, to build trust. So you need to do that. You need to make promises and commitments. Absolutely. It's a time to be judicious about that, meaning only, obviously, to only make promises that you think you can keep. What you know, what you don't know, you don't know, and be as clear as you can about both of those things. So this is a time for clarity. And that goes back to SCARF in a way, because that certainty that that you can provide, it may not be on all the details of a situation, but it'll at least give you a chance to make promises based on what you know, where you think something will work out a certain way. Last but not least, hold others accountable as you hold yourself accountable. So, you know, basically, don't expect of others anything you're not asking yourself to do. And what this is not saying is to not hold team members and employees accountable. Of course, you have to do that. Of course, it's just be clear about what you're holding people accountable to, and make sure that you're doing those things and giving them as much input into what those standards are. I think you're going to have a much more successful experience. So, wrap up this phase of this. Some of my clients are saying, well, you know, I'm kind of grasping for my tone. I don't quite know the tone that I need to be in for this particular period of things. And there are two phrases that sort of occur to me listening to them, and they come from really different audiences. So I'm really getting a kick out of this, because this phrase, bounded optimism, came from a McKinsey report back in March. And I love that expression, because optimism, right? Nobody wants to foul someone who thinks we are going into the pit of despair all day long. And this is pervasive in our life, and it's not going to get any better. And this is, you know, everybody just learn to live with bad times, and that's how things are going to be. I'm not sure I want to foul that individual. On the other hand, I don't want to foul someone who has their head in the clouds so high that they are ignoring facts, that they are ignoring the realities and the challenges and the fears that are there. So that's the bounded part. So it's basically a grounded optimism, basically giving people confidence that we're going to work through this. Yes, we got challenges. This is what we think we know, but the outcome will work out for us. So the optimism is absolutely key. The other phrase, compassionate curiosity, I know it's come from many authors, but my favorite was Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk and practitioner and teacher about meditation and mindfulness, and his book, The Art of Communicating. This sense of compassionate curiosity, and I believe what he meant by that was listening, asking questions that come from a place of compassion, not judgment, giving a chance for people to tell their stories and their words and their ways, and listening to those things and reflecting back what you've heard. And so how to be as a leader, I'd be interested, and actually am very interested in your experiences about leadership and teamwork in this period. Those are some observations I've had, and I have some more ideas and information and tools for leaders to get to here. But I wonder, Carolyn, since I have not been able to look at chat or haven't looked at questions at all. Anything come to your mind that we should be talking about?
Oh, this has been really great, Gary. So thank you for bringing all these important ideas to the conversation this morning. We haven't seen much activity on the chat, so we welcome you all to share your questions, your thoughts, items that you think we should be discussing and bringing into this conversation. I think at the SAIL team, we're working through this just like everyone else. The pace of change, I think, has been pretty rapid. And so for leaders, it can, I think, feel overwhelming, the pace. To have two crises happening at the same time can be unsettling, as you mentioned. And so I think we're all trying to get our responses right and use our platforms for good and for solutions and taking action where we can. So
yeah. I'll maybe I can tell a quick story of a client that I met with this week over Zoom, and it's someone in the Midwest, and so he was talking about the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, and that there was an African American team member. The rest, so it's a 7-person office. 6 people are white, and this one team member is African American, and she brought up her own angst and challenge that she's been feeling over this past few weeks, and feeling vulnerable and feeling all of this. And so this is all going over Zoom. And when he and I met, he brought this up, and he had sort of a look of disappointment in his voice. And I said, well, what happened? He said, she brought that up. I didn't know what to say. I said absolutely nothing. And it is a sense of remorse that he had about, he wished he had the presence, he wished he had the compassionate curiosity to and some empathy to at least say something, to find a way to do. And so the challenge of finding words in this time is one that I think some people are having trouble with, and doing a lot of second guessing, and that's it's just a leadership experience, I guess, to put it in antiseptic sort of words, So I thought I'd share that story. It's probably not the only story like this, and similar things going on with the responses here to the virus. So no one had any questions or comments about space when they all go back to work, and what it'll be like to be in an office, and how they want their leaders to make decisions about space and co-working and all that. Everything is going well.
Well, the only request so far in the chat is to share this recording in your slides. So I think that's a sign that this has been useful and valuable, but no particular questions about that. Oh, we've got one more comment. I think the point you guys make about being encouraging but not unrealistic is very important, and finding that natural balance is key.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Carolyn. I appreciate it. I'll work through a couple more slides, and then, but I would be interested. So this question, as you know, I've never said I'm the font of all knowledge and wisdom about leadership and teamwork. So I want to learn from all of you too. What are you experiencing? What practices of leadership are working for you? Which ones aren't? You don't have to give names. Frankly, I don't even know campuses people are from or anything. So just you could even just give us some examples of some practices that are working and things that aren't. I think that'll be helpful for everyone else to see.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and as the group is thinking about this for themselves, feel free to add that into the chat. But I want to share with you, Gary, there's a comment now or question felt by several people that says there seems to be a growing sense of frustration with the uncertainty aspect of our current context. It almost seemed easier to deal with issues when we were in emergency response mode. Any thoughts on working through this frustration?
Yeah, so the frustration is because is it lack of action happening? Is it what to do first? Is it how to respond effectively? It's probably all of those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's mention of uncertainty. And Angela, if you want me to unmute you, I'm happy to do that, or you can do that yourself.
Yeah, yeah, please.
Let's see, Angela.
Let me get a second to hook up my microphone.
Oh, we can hear you.
Yep. Hi, Angela.
So I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think it's largely in action, but I'm not sure. I just get this sense when I'm in meetings now, as opposed to when the pandemic started, that I think people are not sure how to move forward and are unable to come up with really concrete ways to move forward because we don't know what's going to be the condition in 3 months.
Yeah, that's great. Great question. So can I just give some speculation? And that's all this is. So I don't think there's a book I can pull off the shelf or an article I'm going to find that's going to answer this question. But I'll give you some speculation on it. One could be fatigue. People may be running out of gas right now. They've been through a whole lot, and I think there's kind of a problem fatigue going on that's only been compounded by frankly the events of the last couple of weeks. It's just added to that. So the frustration, some of it could be just from fatigue. I am hearing from several clients that say, Gary, I haven't had a day off since I've been working from home. I used to look forward to a summer vacation. I'm not getting that. I don't get to, I'm afraid to take a day off. So there's some folks that are not doing self-care or giving themselves a chance to try to continue even in this era to do the self-care, and even as we started this session around mindfulness to help them be their best and to lead through periods like this. So that's one theory, is about fatigue. The other is about at the start of every meeting. Here's an idea, and I have a couple of clients that have started to do this. They say it's working for them. Similar story, Angela. And what they've been doing at the start of each meeting is they're asking themselves this question: what is the problem that we are solving for? So basically, before starting the Zoom call and everybody getting on, and can you hear me? Can you see me? How you doing? How you doing? They're asking themselves, what are we here to do? What's the problem that we are solving for? Or what are the problems that we're solving for? So that sense of clarity comes out early so folks can get themselves in an action orientation. If you remember the slide a few back about SCARF, if I can get there without hurting things. Was it SCARF or where was I going? Oh God. So the sense of risk and uncertainty. Yeah. That was right at the beginning of the talk. I'm not going to go back through all that. But the sense of uncertainty versus risk management. So why do I bring that up? It's about as you're having conversations about something, whether it's returning to the office and who's going to go in first, who's going to sit where, who's bringing in the Purell, who's, all these things. Really being, being able to catalog those things to say, all right, is this something that we really don't know? We don't know facts here to substantiate an action one way or the other, or is that we know what we know, but we're hesitant to take action because of risk. And if it's the latter, then what are you going to do to mitigate it? There's nothing that's perfect. So, so again, I think fatigue and uncertainty versus risk management seem to be where at least clients I'm working with are struggling. And I think if they've made some headway, it's been just that awareness. I hope that's helpful.
Gary, I just want to underscore that this is what a lot of people are feeling, is this need to focus on their own self-care. So SAIL has offered a number of webinars this month and over the past few weeks that are all available on demand. So if you are one of those people who are looking for a way to focus on yourself, we have some resources on our website that I direct you to. And you know, there are lots of apps too, Headspace, and New York State partnered with Headspace. So there's some free guided meditations on New York State of Mind website. So there's a lot that people can do to focus on themselves. And I think it's important for leaders to acknowledge these feelings with their team too, to just remind them that they need to take time for themselves. And there's another comment that I want to share in the chat from Lizette saying, definitely trusting your coworkers is extremely important during these times and letting them know that you're available and open to any conversation.
Oh yeah, huge, huge, huge. Being present. So thank you for that that comment, Carolyn. Thanks for reading it. Yeah, that's big. Yeah, I want to give Angela one more thing that just occurred to me. So when leaders and teams are stuck about action, sometimes it helps to take a step back to values, to really ask themselves, so when we're done with making a decision about this, so basically after we've figured out, okay, here's the problem that we're solving for. So before kind of jumping in with a hammer and a screwdriver and a wrench, and you know, I like to be a fix-it person myself, and I sometimes have to pull back from that to say, what are the values we want to bring into this here? So when we solve a problem around returning to work and having our team be working in the office, what are the values we want? So safety is probably a value, I'm sure. Work effectiveness, openness and communication, ways to manage fear. You know, all of these things should be factored in. So as you're having conversations about actions, you can kind of move forward. Carolyn, I want to get to a couple slides because I think these may help with some of the comments and questions that we're getting. So let me just do that. All right, there's just a couple. So I read a book a year ago called Mind Traps by Jennifer Garvey Berger, and I just love this idea. So she talks about 5 what she calls mind traps that leaders, people working in organizations, find themselves as they try to make sense and meaning of the world. All right. So why is this important? It's the stories that we tell ourselves that reinforce our views of things, and that can either be very helpful or it can hold us back from a more creative, open, and resilient response to things. So let me just go into this quickly. It's just so simple stories is, yep, I know the story. I know the heroes, the villains. I know what happens next. Yeah, this is, you know, here's a story I heard. You know, I'll give one around two co-workers having a conflict over something. And yeah, you know, she's always been like this and he's always been like this. And here's the story. This is how this goes. I know what happens next. I don't need to know anymore. So very, very much a simplistic response. And we often find ourselves there, especially when stressed or pressed for time. The second is over rightness. I'm safe if I'm right. I fear being wrong. We may not say I fear being wrong, but that's what's going on in the cortisol-infused brains of ours that may actually force us to get into a corner where I have to be right, I have to be right. And it becomes more of an emotional thing rather than fact-based and context-based. I'm guilty of this one. So I need to make everybody happy. I have 150 people that are working with me. I got to make everybody happy. I got to make every audience happy. I have to make everybody happy. What a day is that, right? Control. And for the control freaks of the world, I'm with you. I feel your pain. This is also a tough day. I have to do it by myself. When I try to delegate it to other people, they don't seem to get it right. You know, I can only do this myself. And so, okay, so there's responses to these things. I'm going to come to the next slide. And ego, this is the hardest one, right? So I am who I am. I have a fixed mindset on things. I am who I am. And you know what? It's worked for me so far. So these are what Garvey Berger talks about as mind traps. And so when you find yourself or you're working with others that you think maybe in these spaces, here's a couple questions to help to dislodge some of the traps. So for the simple story, basically the question is, what are other possible stories here? What else may have happened? What assumptions are you making about the other people, the other situation here? And how accurate are those assumptions? How could you, how might there be other stories? Rightness, if all of my clients would just ask themselves this question, and I say this to them in this way, you'd only ask yourself this question, how could I be wrong, right? So like instead of getting in that corner and fighting everybody else about, this is what I know, I need to be right. If you could get yourself out of that and just ask, how can I be wrong? You can open up so many other possibilities to solve a problem. Agreement. How could conflict and debate serve to help us? So rather than trying to make everybody happy, okay, where are we not in alignment? What am I learning through those conflicts? And what would happen if we talked about it and actually helped to solve a problem that way? For control, a good question is, what can I make possible? So this is about possibility here, about what's doable, what's creative and new. What if I shared information? What if I shared the load about making decisions? People get freaked out about delegation sometimes, so don't even think of it that way. What if I shared information and the challenge that I have? What would happen? Maybe you help mentor other people that way. Maybe other people take on the mantle of leadership. And foremost here, especially in these months and the months to come, how can I give myself permission to change and grow? We're all in that. It's frightening in many, many ways, all of this stuff. But it's going to be, I think, a better experience individually for at least the leaders I've been working with, if they can get themselves to a place by feeling a little less fatigued, taking some time for self-care and openness and compassion. Say, how can I give myself, how am I going to grow through this? I may change through this, and that's okay. So one of my favorite quotes on leadership comes from a leader that I admire, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who has this quote, "I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. So someone I used to work for would say to me all the time, Garry, do both. Do both. So you can be compassionate and strong. You can be smart and empathetic. You can be kind and you can be firm, right? So these folks that find themselves sort of stuck in a false dichotomy are going to have major struggles getting through this period. So, Carolyn, that's the end of my formal chat here. So, were there other comments, questions?
No official questions. Some good
Okay.
conversation in the chat, though. So I open it up. If there are any final thoughts or questions for Garry, now is the time. This has been fantastic, though, Garry, and I really want to thank you for opening up the dialogue and helping us work through some of our own thoughts and challenges.
You're very welcome. And I wish everyone well in this period. Give yourself a dose of self-care and take the risk to be kind and compassionate with other people.
Yes. Yes, we've got another comment here. With simple stories, how do you encourage others to shift the simple story narrative? Ideas for working with someone who does not seem willing to consider other possible stories, but stick to one position.
Yeah. So quickly, asking permission of a person, you know, I don't know enough about this to give you detail, but I can say what I might say at the outset would be to ask them permission. So to say something like, would it be okay if I share with you some other possibilities here? Would that be all right? Can we have a conversation about this? So why ask a question? Gives them a little bit of sense of control in this too, that you're not just coming in with another view. You're asking permission to have a dialogue. That can open up the pores a bit.
Good thought. Good thought. Well, we loved all of your book recommendations too, and so we will be sure to share the slides if that's okay with you. And so hopefully people will find something stimulating to read and help them work through some of these challenging leadership issues we're all faced with.
Happy to be with you all today.